You know, that specific really heavy feeling that hits you around maybe 2 a.m.
Oh yeah, the staring at the ceiling feeling.
Right, exactly. The room is pitch black. Your body is absolutely exhausted, but your brain has just decided to run a marathon.
Replaying emails from 3 days ago.
Yes. Or you're mentally calculating bills or worrying about whether that project you just spent 6 months on is actually going to launch or if it's just going to implode. It's that universal modern sense of the grind,
It really is.
that gnawing anxiety that if you stop spinning the plates for even 1 second, everything you've built just crashes down. So, welcome to our deep dive today. I'm your host, and I am here with our resident expert to unpack this exact feeling.
Glad to be here. And honestly, it is the defining anxiety of our time. We live in a culture that explicitly tells us we are the sole architects of our destiny.
100%.
The message is everywhere, right? If you just wake up at 4 along, optimize your macros, outwork the competition, and hack your schedule, you'll be safe. You'll be successful. We are told that fatigue is basically just the price of admission. Exactly, it's hustle culture. But then you have those moments, usually in the middle of that sleepless night, where you wonder, is any of this actually building something that lasts? Or am I just burning my life force for a paycheck that dissolves into expenses? It feels like running on a treadmill that is slowly speeding up.
That is the big question.
Yeah.
And while we tend to think this is a uniquely modern problem, triggered by smartphones, late-stage capitalism, and the 24-hour news cycle, it is actually an ancient human struggle.
Which brings us to our source material for today. We are doing a deep dive into a very short, very punchy piece of ancient poetry, Psalm 127.
Right.
Now, for those of you listening who are familiar with the Bible, you might know this one. But even if you have never opened a Bible, the insights here regarding work anxiety and legacy are psychologically profound. We've got commentaries, linguistic notes, and historical context to unpack to see what this text is trying to communicate. It is a fascinating text. And the first thing to note from the sources is the attribution. This is a song of degrees, or more accurately, a song of ascents. And it's traditionally attributed to Solomon.
Let's actually pause on that phrase, Song of Ascents. What does that imply? Is it about, climbing a corporate ladder or something?
Not quite, no. These were the songs pilgrims would sing on their way up to Jerusalem for the annual religious festivals.
Oh, literally ascending.
Exactly. Jerusalem is at a high elevation, so they were literally hiking up. Picture a road trip playlist, but for spiritual preparation. As they hiked up toward the temple, they sang these lines to center their minds and prepare their hearts.
Which makes the authorship even more ironic, right? Solomon is the one writing this.
That is the tradition, yes.
Solomon, the ultimate builder, the guy who built the first temple, which was one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. He built massive palaces. He had fleets of trading ships. The texts say he accumulated 666 talents of gold annually. He was the wealthiest, most industrious CEO in Israel's history.
The ultimate hustler.
Right. And yet he is the one writing a poem about how futile work is.
It does seem contradictory on the surface, but think about it. Who is better positioned to tell you that success doesn't guarantee peace?
That's a fair point.
It's like hearing a billionaire tech mogul admit that money didn't solve his insomnia or fix his family. You listen differently than if it came from someone who never had the money in the first place. Solomon had the success, he had the buildings, he had the hustle, and he's telling the pilgrims to be careful.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack that warning. We want to find the shortcut, if you will, to understanding the balance between working hard, because let's be honest, you have to work to eat and not burning out.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build a life without being crushed by the anxiety of maintaining it?
Precisely. And the psalm is structured simply almost like a logic problem or a two-act play. The first half is about the futility of the godless grind work and security. The second half shifts to family and legacy. And as we'll see, the connection between the two is surprisingly tight.
Let's get right into the text then. Section 1. The psalm opens with an image that feels very relevant to anyone trying to get a startup off the ground or just pay a mortgage.
Yeah.
Verse 1, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it.
And the second part reinforces it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain.
In vain. That is a really heavy phrase. In English, it just sounds like it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like I tried to fix the sink in vain. But looking at the Hebrew notes we have here, the word is shav.
Right, shav. It's a very rich word. It implies emptiness, deceptiveness or worthlessness. It's like a breath of wind or a mirage.
So it's not just failing.
No, it's not just that you failed to build the house. It is that the success itself is hollow. You could build the biggest house on the block, but if it's in vain, it provides no shelter for your soul.
But does that mean the labor itself is the problem? Because I can hear you, the listener, thinking, okay, so I should just sit on the couch, eat chips, and let God build my house.
No, and that is a crucial distinction to make. The text acknowledges the builders are building, the watchman is watching, the effort is absolutely there. The problem isn't the work, it's the foundation and the reliance.
The reliance on what?
On yourself. The text is arguing that without the divine presence, without God as the primary architect, the outcome is fragile. You can build a magnificent structure, but if it's not aligned with God's purpose, it has no soul, it has no staying power.
It's the difference between activity and productivity. Or maybe activity and meaning.
I'd go a step further. It is a warning against autonomous self-reliance. You see, the watchman can stay awake all night scanning the horizon for enemies. He is doing his job perfectly. But if the city is destined to fall, or if the threat comes from within, or if a natural disaster strikes, his wakefulness is useless. It is about recognizing the hard limits of human vigilance.
We can mitigate risk, but we can't eliminate it. That is a hard pill to swallow for control freaks.
Exactly. We build firewalls, we buy insurance, we take vitamins, we obsess over market trends, we are watching the city. But Solomon is saying, do not be deluded into thinking you are in total control. The variables are infinite and your control is finite.
Which leads perfectly into verse 2, which honestly felt like a personal attack when I first read it. Let me read this. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows.
The bread of sorrows. That is such a striking image. It's poetic but visceral.
It is. But let's look at the behavior first. Rising early and sitting up late. That is literally the definition of the modern work ethic. We praise that, oh, Elon sleeps under his desk. She's the first one in, last one out. We wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. But here Solomon calls it shav, vain.
Because context matters. He isn't attacking hard work. The Bible is actually full of praise for diligence. Proverbs, which Solomon also wrote, tells us to go to the ant and learn her ways to work hard. Here he is specifically attacking anxious toil.
How do you tell the difference, though? How do I know if I'm being diligent or if I'm just being anxious?
Look at the phrase, bread of sorrows. In the Hebrew, the root word there relates to etzev, which connects back to Genesis and the curse of toil. It implies labor that is painful, worried, and arduous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it paints a picture of someone who is frantically striving, driven by the fear that if they stop for 1 second, they'll starve. You are literally eating your worry.
So it's a scarcity mindset.
It is the grind set fueled by panic. You're waking up early not because you're excited to create, but because you're terrified of falling behind. You're staying up late not because you're inspired, but because you're trying to control every variable. You are eating anxiety for breakfast and dinner.
And that's where the counterpoint comes in. Because the verse doesn't end with the anxiety. It contrasts that bread of sorrows with something else entirely. It says, for so he giveth his beloved sleep.
Yes. This is one of the most comforting yet challenging lines in the scripture.
But isn't that a bit simplistic? Like, don't worry, just take a nap.
It's profound theology disguised as biology. Think about what sleep actually represents. When you go to sleep, you are rendering yourself completely vulnerable. You are engaging in an act of total surrender. You become unconscious.
You're definitely not productive when you're asleep.
Exactly. When you sleep, you are admitting that the world can spin without you for 8 hours. You are admitting that you are not the general manager of the universe. You are resigning from the position of God every single night.
So insomnia in this context, the kind of driven by worry, not medical issues, is almost a form of arrogance, or at least a severe lack of trust.
In a spiritual sense, yes. It is a refusal to let go of the controls. The psalm is saying that God gives sleep to his beloved because sleep is the ultimate sign of trust. It's saying, Lord, I've done what I can do today. The rest is up to you. You build the house. You watch the city. I'm going to rest.
That completely reframes the idea of rest. It's not laziness, it's a spiritual discipline.
It is an act of faith. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the psalm, we see the argument forming. You can work yourself to death eating that bread of sorrows. But true prosperity, the kind that doesn't leave you empty, includes the ability to rest in God's sovereignty.
Okay, so we've got the house and the city, the external stuff, the career, the safety. Then the psalm takes a hard right turn. Verse 3 starts talking about kids. It feels like a total non sequitur. We were talking about architecture and sleep, and now we're talking about babies.
It often feels that way to modern readers, but In the original language, the link is seamless. This is where the commentary notes really help. The Hebrew word for builders in verse 1 is bonim. The word for children or sons in verse 3 is banim.
Bonham and Banham, just a vowel change.
Right. They come from the exact same root word, bana, to build. So the first half is about building a house, the structure. The second half is about building a household, the family. It's the logical next step in legacy. You build the house to put the family in it.
Okay, so let's look at verse 3. Lo, children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward.
This is a massive cultural pivot for us today. In the modern world, we often view children as liabilities. Let's be honest. They are expensive. They consume time. They prevent us from rising early and sitting up late to make money.
Right. The cost of raising a child index comes out every year, and everyone just panics. We treat them like luxury goods we can't afford.
Exactly. But Solomon views them as a reward and an asset. He flips the economic script entirely, and then he uses this famous metaphor in verse 4 to explain why. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth.
Arrows. It's a very specific, somewhat aggressive metaphor, isn't it?
It is martial imagery. It implies a battle, or at least a mission.
Usually we think of children as saplings to be watered or clay to be molded, soft images. But an arrow is a weapon.
It is a weapon, but think about the physics of an arrow. What is it designed to do that a sword cannot do?
You launch it, it leaves you.
It travels distances the warrior cannot. An arrow is designed to be propelled outward toward a target. This connects deeply to the idea of legacy. When we view children or the next generation we are mentoring as arrows, we realize our job is not just to keep them safe in the quiver. Our job is to sharpen them, aim them, and release them.
I love that visual. The archer stands still, but the arrow flies into the future.
Right. But here is the catch, and it connects right back to the first half of the psalm. You cannot aim an arrow accurately if your hand is shaking from exhaustion.
Oh, wow. That's good. That links the two parts perfectly.
If you are eating the bread of sorrows, if you are frantic and sleep-deprived because you're trying to build the house on your own strength, you will not have the steady hand required to launch the next generation. The stability of the archer determines the flight of the arrow.
So the godless grind doesn't just hurt you. It hurts your ability to shape the future. It warps the trajectory of the people depending on you.
Precisely. Your anxiety becomes their trajectory. If you are vibrating with stress, you cannot launch them with precision.
The psalm wraps up with verse 5. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate.
We really need to decode the gate here. In ancient Israel, the gate wasn't just an entrance. It was the courthouse. It was the civic center. It was where business deals were signed and legal disputes were settled by the elders.
So, speaking with enemies in the gate implies a lawsuit, a political debate.
It implies facing challenges in the public square, legal attacks, social pressure, business disputes. The idea is that a man with a quiver full of arrows, a strong, united family grounded in divine purpose, has a defense force. He has backup.
He's not alone.
He's not alone. In a society without a police force or a modern welfare state, your family was your social security and your legal defense team. If you were unjustly accused, your sons would stand at the gate and say, no, that's not what happened. It's about not being ashamed or humiliated because you have support.
It's really interesting how the psalm moves from the individual anxiety of the watchman, in verse 1, one guy trying to guard a whole city alone, to the collective strength of the family in verse 5.
It moves from isolation to community, from vain labor to happy fullness. And the bridge between those two states is trust in God. The isolated man tries to control everything and fails. The dependent man trusts God, builds a family, and finds strength in numbers.
So let's bring this down to the pavement. We've got this ancient poem. We've got Solomon telling us to chill out. How do you actually apply this as a modern listener who has a mortgage, a demanding boss, and maybe doesn't have a quiver full of biological children?
Well, the first application is simply re-examining your foundation. You have to ask the question, what am I building and who is the architect?
It's easy to say God is the architect, but how do you know if you're actually living that way?
You look at the fruit. Are you eating the bread of sorrows? If your life is characterized by chronic anxiety, fear of the future, and an inability to rest the source material suggests you are building in your own strength, you might be succeeding on paper, but spiritually you are fragile.
It's all about alignment.
Activity without alignment leads to frustration. Success is strongest when it rests on spiritual grounding. You have to move from a mindset of ownership to stewardship.
Break that down for me.
If I own the house, I have to worry about everything. The roof, the foundation, the taxes. It's all on me. But if I'm just managing it for the owner, I can sleep at night because the ultimate responsibility lies with him. I do my job, but I don't carry the weight of the outcome.
That leads right to the sleep thing. I think this is the most countercultural move we can make today.
Absolutely. We need to break the cycle of exhaustion. In a world that glorifies being always on, choosing to rest is an act of rebellion.
It's basically saying I trust God enough to close my eyes.
Yes. Overwork fueled by anxiety is not a badge of honor. It's a sign of a lack of trust. If you are listening to this and you are perpetually exhausted, you might need to ask yourself, what am I trying to control that isn't mine to control?
That's the Watchman metaphor again. We got our kids, we got our 401ks, we got our health. But vigilance has limits.
We cannot control every outcome. We can be responsible, but we cannot be sovereign. And realizing that, truly accepting that, is where peace comes from. Surrender brings peace.
Yeah, what about the arrows? If you're single or you don't have kids, does the second half of this psalm just not apply to you?
Not at all. We have to expand the definition of children to include the concept of spiritual heritage, mentorship, discipleship. The Hebrew concept of family was always broader than just nuclear biology.
So it's about who you're investing in.
Exactly. Who are you launching? We all have arrows in our quiver, people younger than us colleagues. We mentor nieces, nephews, members of our community. The principle holds true investment in people outlasts investment in projects.
That is a powerful thought. You can build a company and it might go bankrupt in 10 years. But if you pour into a person, that impact ripples out in ways you can't even see.
That is legacy. And that is what Solomon calls a reward. Success isn't just the accumulation of stuff, it's stability, relationship, and spiritual alignment.
It really challenges the modern definition of success, doesn't it? We tend to measure success by the size of the house we build, the bank account, the title. But this psalm measures success by the quality of the rest we have and the strength of the relationships we nurture.
It does, and it suggests that you can have the massive house and the guarded city, but if you are eating the bread of sorrows, you are poor. But if you have trust, sleep, and a quiver full of relationships grounded in God, you are prosperous.
It connects the spiritual to the practical in such a direct way. It's not just trust God so you go to heaven. It's trust God so you don't have a nervous breakdown on Tuesday.
The spiritual reality dictates the physical reality. If your spirit is at rest in God's sovereignty, your body can rest in sleep. If your spirit is anxious and self-reliant, your body will be eating the bread of sorrows.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've gone from the anxiety of the watchman to the confidence of the archer.
We have. And the consistent thread is that the strongest foundations are spiritual ones. Whether it's brick and mortar or flesh and blood, if the Lord doesn't build it, it's just a facade.
I think for me, the big takeaway is the permission to let go. To do the work, be the builder, be the watchman, but then to clock out. To say, okay, God, your turn.
That is the ultimate application. Work faithfully. Guard responsibly, but rest confidently.
Work faithfully, rest confidently. I really like that. Listen, if you found this deep dive helpful, if it maybe lowered your blood pressure a few points, we'd love for you to support the show. You can get more resources, including the commentary notes we use today, by joining our mailing list at https://bit.via-practical-advice.
We have some great stuff there to help you dig deeper into the Hebrew and the historical context.
We do. That's https://bet.land. Practical advice. And as you head into your week, hopefully a week with a little more sleep, we wanted to leave you with one final question to chew on. We talked about a lot of concepts, the house, the watchman, the arrows, but looking at your own life right now, ask yourself this.
How will you apply this information in your life? Where do you need to stop eating the bread of sorrows and start trusting the builder?
Thanks for listening. We will see you on the next deep dive.